I've always loved the film look. There's just something about it. The colors, the textures, the way it feels more alive. As a photographer and filmmaker, I'm constantly trying to recreate that look in my work. So when Dehancer reached out to me to try their software and share my honest thoughts, I was genuinely excited. If you're hearing about Dehancer for the first time, here is a simple way to think about it. Dehancer is a tool that helps you to recreate the film look using actual film scans. So this isn't just a LUT that you drop on your footage and call it a day. It's built with real film characteristics, things like grain, halation, bloom, all working together to make your digital footage feel more like actual film. It works inside DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, and Premiere Pro, and they even have a desktop app, which I'm currently beta testing. I'll share more on this in another video. Dehancer was kind enough to give me a 10% discount code, so if you're interested, you can use Kali10 at checkout. And just to be clear, I'm not a professional colorist. Everything I'm sharing here is based on how I use it in my workflow. With that out of the way, let's jump into Resolve and see how this actually works. Before we jump into Dehancer, let me quickly show you how I've set things up, just so we're on the same page. On my Mac, I'm using the BT709 display profile, and the reason is simply because most content we create ends up on YouTube or social media, and those platforms are based on BT709. So I like to grade in the color space my audience will actually see. It just helps me to stay consistent and avoid surprises when I export. Now inside Resolve, this is how I've set up my project. For my color science, I'm using DaVinci RGB. Timeline color space, I'm using DaVinci Wide Intermediate, and output color space, I'm using Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. The reason I use DaVinci Wide Gamma is because it gives me more room to work with. It holds more color information, especially if you're working with log footage. And Gamma 2.4 is just more standard for video delivery. Now, this isn't the only way to do it. It's just what works for me. So we'll just head into the color page, and here is a node tree that I have laid out already. First, we'll be doing a color space transform, and for this image was shot on the Fujifilm X-T5 F-Log2. F-Log2 is in the Rec 2020 color space. Inputs gamma should be F-Log2, and our output color space would be DaVinci Wide Gamut, and output gamma would be DaVinci Intermediate. And for output display transform, we would go from DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate to Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4. So we've converted our image from F-Log2 to Rec 709, but we're working in DaVinci color space. Quick tip before we head into Dehancer: it's advised to make basic adjustments to your image before you use Dehancer. So first we'll start with exposure. For exposure, I usually use the global wheel. Looking at the waveform, I can make adjustments to the exposure, I think around here. And the next is white balance. So this was shot during golden hour, so it's expected to be warm, but I think it's too warm and I would like to cool it down a bit. So for my white balance, I usually use the linear technique. How I do that is I just right click on the node, go down to gamma and select linear. So I'm just going to push this towards the blue a bit just to cool it down. Before, after. Great. The next is contrast, but I'm going to make contrast adjustments in the Dehancer node. I have another node here which is for look adjustments. This node, I always come back to it after I am done making adjustments in the Dehancer node. We'll just head into the Dehancer node and we'll go into our effects and we'll just drag and drop Dehancer. And by default, Dehancer applies a bunch of effects and a ton of grain. You just go down to the bottom of the Dehancer and click disable all tools. Again, you realize that a lot of these tabs are open, and a quick tip: if you hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and click on any of the tabs, it closes all the tabs, and that way it's less overwhelming. So the first tab is the input tab, and this is where you tell Dehancer what kind of footage you're working with, whether Rec 709, log, and so on. If this is wrong, everything else won't look right. So it's always good to set it first. For our color space, we're working in DaVinci Wide Gamut, so I would select DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. And under the input, you have other options, but I won't be making any adjustment to those. And the next step is to choose your look, which is in the film tab, and Dehancer has over 50 film profiles that you can pick from. Some of my favorites are the Kodak Portra series and the Kodak Vision 3 series. I think I like Kodak Gold 200. And under the film profile, you have a push and pull slider. If you pull it to the left, it cools your image, and if you pull it to the right, it warms up your image even more. So I think I'm just going to warm this up. After that, I go into the print. This controls how the image is finished. It affects contrast and overall feel. So film gives you the look and print shapes how the look is presented. In the print profile, you have a couple of them. You have the Cineon Film Log, Fujifilm 3513 print film, the Kodak 2383 print film, which is one of the popular print films used in Nollywood, and then you have Kodak Endera glossy paper. So we're just going to enable this and see what they look like. So this is Cineon Film Log, Fujifilm 3513, Kodak 2383, and Kodak Endera glossy paper. Well, I think for this, I prefer the Kodak Endera glossy paper, so I would stick with that. And under this print tab, you also have other options like your exposure for this particular print, your tonal contrast, your color density, and saturation. So usually I would bump up the color density to the highest. It creates that rich, deep colors you see in film. So I will crank this up all the way to the highest. And tonal contrast, here you can either add or reduce contrast. So for this, I will also go back to my waveform and use that. In typical film, the shadows are not crushed and the highlights are not too high. Film is usually not too contrasty, and one thing you can do is enable the analog range limiter, and it just compresses everything on the high and then everything at the bottom and brings it closer to the center, more like film. And once that's enabled, I can now make adjustments to my tonal contrast. About here looks good to me. And after the print, I can now go up and make adjustments to the other tabs. So we head to the film developer, and with the film developer, you have the option to affect your contrast and then your gamma correction. And I'm guessing gamma correction is more of your midtones. And then you have color boost, which is like saturation. So if you crank this all the way up, see, it becomes too saturated. So for this, I'm just going to bring this up, but not too much, say around 40. Yeah. And next is film compression, and this targets mainly your highlight areas. In film usually has this smooth roll off on the high end, and you usually don't have that in digital, but with the film compressions, once you enable it, look at these highlight areas here and see what it does by default. So this is it. This is with it off, and this is with it on. This is one of my favorite tools in Dehancer. I use it in almost all my footage, and I haven't seen another plugin that does it as good as Dehancer. So by default, it's already looking good, but you can also increase the impact if you want more of the highlights to be rolled off, and you can also set where your white point begins, where it starts to roll off, and then you have your tonal range, and then you have the color density for the highlight areas. So if you bring this up, look what happens to the highlight area. It's making it rich, bringing back some of those colors that are lost in the highlights. So I usually just leave this 100 too. And next is the expand tab, and this is where you set your floor and your ceiling. So you just tell Dehancer where you want your black points to be, and then where your white points should be. Next is the color head, and I usually think of these first three sliders of the color head as the RGB channels on the curve. So you can gang them together just like you would with the curves, and any adjustments you make affects the three channels. So you can make adjustments to all of them together, or you can ungang them and make adjustments to them individually. So for this image, I think I just want to warm it up just to add to that warm sunset vibe already. So I'm going to add a ton of yellow to this, and I'm going to take out the greens a bit and add a little bit of magenta, not too much. And I think I'm going to add to this. So this is without the color head, and this is with the color head. Just a bit of fine tuning. Now I think it's too green, so I may just add a little bit more magenta to this. And then the next section of the color head, you have your shadow tone, midtones, and highlight tone. You can push a specific color to your highlights, either warm or cool, and the same thing applies for the rest. So this is what we have with our color head. Before, after. And next we have our film grain, and for film grain, if you turn it on by default, you can see how much of the grain is showing up. Here you have so many profiles to pick from, already custom made. The lower the number, the higher the grain, and the higher the number, the lower the grain. And you also have the amount slider to increase how much of the grain you want in your image. So I'm going to take this to 100 so that you see what it does. And these are 65, and this is what 8mm look like. I'm just going to go for the 65mm grain. Also, if you feel like you're not satisfied with this grain presets here, you have the custom where you can make adjustments and fine-tune almost all the parameters to your taste. Next is halation. So halation adds a subtle red glow to bright areas. If we turn this on, look at these highlight areas, you would see what it's doing to the highlight areas. You see that reddish glow around the highlight areas. Just similar to the film grain presets, if you set 8mm, 8mm will be more aggressive than the 65mm. In the halation, you realize that there are two versions of each. The no remjet versions are usually more aggressive. Look at her hair, look at almost everything has that red glow around it, and this is the normal 8mm. Next is bloom. And similar to halation, bloom adds highlight glow but with no colors. So let's turn this on and see, and let's go for 8mm. So look what happens when we turn this on, off, on, off. Look at this, the highlights on her hair. Look at these highlight areas of the sky. See before, after. Just look at that glow. Before, after, before, after. And the same preset style with the previous ones we've talked about. Next is film damage. And film damage adds dust and scratches, more for creative looks actually. I don't use this often, but there are situations where I think I might be using them. So let's turn this on and see what it looks like. Now you can see some of these scratches on screen. So when this plays through, you see what the film damage is doing, right? And again, you don't have to use every tool in Dehancer. Just use whatever you feel is necessary for the project you're working on, and you should be good. So for this, I'm just going to keep this at default and turn it off. Next is film breadth. And film breadth basically simulates the tiny exposure shifts you get when shooting on real film. So I don't know if this is going to be very obvious, but let's set this to the more aggressive version of it, and then let's play through. I think this might be difficult to see because this was me shooting against the sun, but you would see a bit of color shifts, more like a flicker, but with different colors going across the screen. That's what film breadth does. Next is gate weave, and gate weave simulates the slight movement or jitters you get from real film running through a camera or projector. For lack of a better word, I think I will just describe it as camera shake. Here's what happens when we select an aggressive version of it and then enable. Seems like the image just zoomed in, and when we play through, we should see something like shakes. I don't know if you can see it, but it simulates that shake, almost like a handheld camera shake. I'm just going to leave this on. And one of my favorite section of Dehancer is also the Overscan. This simulates the vintage film borders you get around your image. Let's enable this, and then this is what it looks like. So there are different versions of the film borders you can try down to your taste. And aside the profiles, you have these tools down here that you can use to make adjustments and fine-tune it to your taste. Something like exposure, which I kind of like. And then you have scale. You can adjust the scale of the overscan. You can adjust your lens zoom, how zoomed in or zoomed out the footage looks around with the borders on it. You can adjust the position. And there is the gate defocus, which I really like because it kind of softens the edges of the overscan. So this you can adjust to your taste, but for this I'm just going to turn it off. The next tab is Vignette, which basically is the darkening of the edges of your image. So if you enable this, you can either make it bright or darken it, and you can adjust the size, the feather, how soft it is, how aggressive it is, and the aspect ratio. You can just customize to your taste. And the answer advice that if you're going to be using the vignette, you should turn it on first before you make any adjustment. I'm just going to turn this off. And the next tab is your monitor tab. First thing you have is your false color. It just helps to tell if your exposure is right. So anywhere in green, gray, lemon green, and the gray area is properly exposed, and everything in the purple, blue, dark blue areas are underexposed. So for this, it's looking like we are underexposed in some areas, and you can easily just go up and fix that with the expand. So we can bring up the blacks, and you can turn this off. And the next is clipping indicator. So the clipping indicator shows you which areas are clipping also. So both of them are like utility tools to help you nail exposure. So if we go back to our black point again, and let's do this. Now everywhere in blue is clipping, so we have to bring this down until the blue is gone. And if we pull up the white, everywhere in red is clipping. We have to take this down until the reds are gone. Yeah. And next we have the output tab. So when you are done making all your adjustments and you feel like this is a little too much, instead of going back to make adjustments to these individual tabs, you can just pull down the impact. So it adjusts the overall impact of the whole adjustment you've made in Dehancer. So 100, take it down, and there is no effect from Dehancer at all, and you take it to 100 and you have full effects. Next is your LUT generator, and this is where you can convert this whole adjustment into a LUT that you can use in other programs. And the last tab is the options tab, and under the options tab you have, which is on normal fast, and it means your playback will be fast, and you have high but slow playback, so you pick to your taste. So for me, I just usually leave it on default. And yeah, that is all for the Dehancer part. And I have these two nodes here where I make some minor adjustments. So for this is Radial Blur, and it's a compound node. When you open it up, all I'm doing is I'm using the Radial Blur effects built into DaVinci Resolve, and then I'm using the power window to select what areas I want the Radial Blur to affect, which is around here, inverted outside the power window. So I can also just adjust this, and yeah, just fine tune it, and there. And then the last node is sharpening. So usually after I'm done, I just turn on sharpening a bit just to sharpen those fine edges. And what I'm doing here is in the blur tab, I just reduce this from 50 to about 40, and then I'm masking it with the scaling at 0.04. And yeah, that's it for Dehancer. One thing I really like about Dehancer is how easy it makes everything. Just with one node, you can make all the adjustments you want, and you don't have to mess around with so many tools in DaVinci Resolve, which I think it's actually beginner friendly for someone that is just trying to find their way around look creation. After using Dehancer for a bit, there are a few things I think could make the experience even better. First, I would really love a cleaner starting point. Right now, when you load it up, a lot of effects are already active. I think it would be better if everything was turned off by default, so you can build your look from scratch. Second, going through film profiles can be a bit slow. Right now, you have to click through them one by one. It would really be nice to have something like arrows button, just to cycle through and preview different film profiles. Even better, maybe a favorite option so you can save the ones you use the most. And lastly, I think the interface could be a bit cleaner on startup. Maybe all the tabs could be collapsed by default. That way it feels less overwhelming, especially for someone just getting into film emulation. Overall, I think Dehancer is a really powerful tool, especially if you're someone who loves the film look and wants more control over how you achieve it. I'll be making more videos showing different ways I use Dehancer in my work. So if it's something you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss them. If you have any questions or things you would like me to test, drop them in the comments. I would love to know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.